Good day, everyone, and welcome to the LEAD Center webinar series on the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. This is the first in a four-part series. Today's presentation is on the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act from a disability perspective. I am Rebecca Salon. I'm the project director for the LEAD Center at the National Disability Institute, and we have several speakers today. Michael Morris is the Executive Director of National Disability Institute in Washington, D.C., and LEAD Center's Public Policy Team Co-Lead. Michael has served as an advisor and technical expert to multiple federal agencies on policy and systems relationships at federal, state, and local levels to advance employment, economic stability, mobility, and asset development for persons with disabilities. Kim Vitelli is the Chief of the Division of National Programs at the Employment and Training Administration at the U.S. Department of Labor. The Employment and Training Administration, ETA, administers federal government job training and worker dislocation programs, federal grants to states for public employment service programs, and unemployment insurance benefits. These services are primarily provided through the state and local workforce development systems. Don Webby is Labor Market Information Director at the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. Unfortunately, Mr. Webby is not able to join us today. Bridget Brown is Executive Director of the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals and has been in that position since 2008. Bridget leads efforts to strengthen our nation's workforce development system and improve the skills and effectiveness of workforce professionals across the country. Prior to her role at NAUDIP, she was the Executive Director of America's Career Resource Network Association, the Director of Program Development for the National Skills Standards Board at the U.S. Department of Labor, to name a few of the roles she's played. She's a certified workforce development professional, a global career facilitator instructor, and has over 25 years of policy experience in personnel certification, workforce development, career and technical education, and advocacy. David Mank is the newly selected chairperson of the Advisory Committee on Increasing Competitive Integrated Employment for Individuals with Disabilities. He also is the director of the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at Indiana University, Indiana University's Center for Excellence on Developmental Disabilities. He's a full professor in the School of Education, Department of Curriculum and Instruction. As an educator, writer, and research, Dr. Mank has extensive experience in employment of people with disabilities and transition from school to work. He also has authored or co-authored dozens of articles and book chapters. For those of you who are new to the LEAD Center webinars, the LEAD Center is the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. We're a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. And I'd now like to ask my colleague, Nakia Matthews, to give you some information so that you can fully participate in today's webinar. Nakia?
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure that your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel. And if you accidentally close this panel or if the sound stops, you can reopen the audio broadcast panel by going to the Communicate menu at the top of the screen and choosing Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer, or if you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the toll-free or toll number you see here and enter the meeting code. Please note that you do not need to enter an attendee ID. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which appears in the lower right-hand corner of the webinar platform. If you would like to make the media viewer panel larger, you can do so by minimizing some of the other panels like chat or Q&A, and conversely, if you do not need the captioning, you can minimize the media viewer panel. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat box or the Q&A box to send any questions that you may have during the course of the webinar to either me, Nakia Matthews, or to Elizabeth Jennings, and we will direct those questions accordingly. If you are listening by phone only and not logged into the web portion, you may also ask questions by emailing them directly to Elizabeth at ejennings@ndi-inc.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the materials will be placed on the Lead Center website at the URL you see here. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me a message, or you may also email me directly at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org.
Thank you so much, Nakia. And now I'd like to ask our colleague, Dr. Christopher Button, who is Supervisor of Workforce Systems Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, to offer some words of welcome. Chris?
Thanks, Rebecca. On behalf of ODEP, the Office of Disability Employment Policy, I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, WIOA From a Disability Perspective. We're really excited about this webinar for many reasons. The reauthorized law includes amendments relating to disability throughout, and this provides a tremendous opportunity and incentive for the public workforce system across the nation to take a look at how they are welcoming youth and adults with disabilities as customers into their programs and services, and what actions they can take to make their systems even more welcoming and inclusive. Now, we note that there's tremendous registration for this webinar today, and it's really gratifying to see the obvious interest from the system and from individuals with disabilities and their advocates across the nation in understanding what's happening as the WIOA reauthorized law moves to implementation. We have amazing leaders on the webinar today. I want to really thank each one of them and welcome them to the webinar. I know that each one brings tremendous expertise to the conversation today, and we really appreciate them taking their time. And we also appreciate having all of you take the time to be with us today. And, of course, I also want to thank our lead technical assistance team for organizing this very timely and informative webinar. And with that, Rebecca, I'm going to just throw it back to you because I don't want to take our valuable time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Chris. The LEAD Center's mission is to advance sustainable individual and systems-level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for individuals across the spectrum of disability. And we encourage you to visit the LEAD Center's website for more information about what we do. To just give you an overview of the agenda for today's call, we will review the outcomes for the webinar, talk about the impact of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act on employment and economic advancement outcomes for people with disabilities, review ETA's activities and timelines, engage in a panel discussion with the speakers that we introduced at the beginning, talk about what action steps you can take as WIOA is implemented, and have some time for questions and answers. At the end of the webinar, we also will give you a preview of the upcoming webinars that are part of this 4-part webinar series, as well as other webinars that will be hosted through LEAD Center. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Michael Morris to provide an overview of WIOA from a disability perspective.
Thank you, Rebecca. Pleasure to be here today with all of you. The level of interest is staggering as close to 500 people have signed on and are participating with us today. We hope what we can accomplish is a set of outcomes. First, I want to be able to share with you big changes in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act from a disability perspective. We will be hearing from ETA, the Employment and Training Administration, about where they are with activities and timelines. We will share with you as well additional system coordination requirements, both within the workforce investment system and outside of it in terms of the communities that you participate in. And I think most importantly is to have an action orientation, not only to learn about and understand better WIOA, but also what can you do? What can you do to influence the way WIOA is going to be implemented in your state and in your local communities? WIOA was signed into law by President Obama on July 22nd, 2014. It will always be known as Public Law 113-128. As many of you know, the proposed rules, which are anxiously, we are all waiting for, are now most likely going to be released in the spring of this year. We're getting closer. As an overview, large picture about WIOA, we know it is about bringing together business and job seekers and really trying to create workforce solutions. At the center of this universe remains one-stop centers, or as now we commonly refer to them as American Job Centers, eager to serve as customers, job seekers, and people with and without disabilities, and employers. We know that the workforce system is focused on improving economic results, looking at regions within a state, looking at diverse collaborations of the public and private sector. We know that WIOA is about job seekers with and without disabilities coming to a place, the American Job Centers, to benefit from job search and placement assistance, career counseling, skills training, and other supportive services. We know also that the new law will take full effect on July 1st, 2015, with the exception of amendments to the Rehabilitation Act, which is part of Title IV of WIOA, which took effect on the date of enactment. What I want to start off with is sharing with you, from a disability perspective, what are some of the big changes. First, there is an emphasis on career pathways and sector partnerships to promote employment in in-demand industries and occupations. Second, there is an elimination of what many of us had become very accustomed to, which was a sequencing of services, moving from core to intensive to training services. What we now have is a focus on career pathways and career services, training, and supportive services. We also have, as a major big change, the establishment by each state, which has already begun, is the creation of a single unified state strategic plan. Before we had this option, but now all states will be mandated to create these unified strategic plans that actually will involve a review by both the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. We also know, in terms of big changes, that individuals with disabilities must be a part of state and local strategic plans, that performance outcomes must be identified and reported, including a disaggregation of data related to what are outcomes related to people with disabilities. We also know, and very much a new feature of WIOA, is the development of criteria for certifying American Job Centers that includes a review and assessment of physical and programmatic access of facilities, programs, services, technology and materials, and appropriate staff training and support. We know further in terms of big changes related to youth. Under Title I, 75% of the Youth Formula Program funds must be spent in the future on out-of-school youth, as compared to only 30% under the former Workforce Investment Act. We also know that at least 20% of local youth formula funds must be used for work experiences, such as summer jobs, on-the-job training, and internships under Title I. And under Title IV, in a major shift, we know that at least 15% of state VR funds must provide pre-employment transition services to prepare youth for post-secondary education and employment. We also recognize, although there has always been a focus on the employer as a key relevant stakeholder, we see an enhanced focus on the employer as a customer. Under Title I, state and local WIBs must be comprised of a majority of business representatives with a business chair. State and local plans must identify employment needs of employers and develop strategies to meet those needs under Title I. Local boards are to enhance collaboration with employers, other economic development entities at a local level, and service providers, including community colleges. And under Title IV, the vocational rehabilitation program must identify and respond to needs of employers and help with recruitment, job matching, hiring, on-the-job training, accommodations, retention, and career advancement. Additional system requirements, particularly focus on systems coordination. Under Title I, there must be an alignment of employment, training, and education, including career and technical education with human service programs not covered by the Unified State Plan. So what's going on in a system regarding service delivery in mental health to people in service delivery with intellectual and developmental disabilities, how Medicaid as a support system, one has to look at this in a unified way, and it needs to be a part of what's included in that Unified State Plan. Also in Title I, there is a requirement of describing how community colleges will be engaged as key partners in the workforce development system. And then finally, there is the clear promotion of work-based training and sector strategies to address the needs of multiple employers in each industry sector at a local level. And then looking at coordination system requirements at a Title IV, the vocational rehabilitation system has some very specific new requirements. VR must enter into formal agreements with the state Medicaid system for service delivery to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, formal agreements with the mental health agency, and all is about improving coordination of resources, both short and long term, to, of course, achieve this goal of advancement of employment and hopefully economic status. Vocational rehabilitation must improve and expand VR services for students with disabilities on a statewide basis. And this very much complements what has been part of system requirements in IDEA in terms of students with disabilities and youth in transition. VR in the state plan must indicate how services will be coordinated with the Social Security Administration's Ticket to Work program. And there has been, in recent years, a growing number of workforce investment boards and American Job Centers becoming employment networks and participating in the Ticket to Work program. And VR must improve engagements with in-demand industry sectors to increase competitive integrated employment opportunities. And more clear than ever before, the outcome of the VR system is about improving and increasing competitive integrated employment outcomes. For the first time in Title IV, the title that relates to the vocational rehabilitation system, there is added a definition of customized employment. This is something that has been truly championed and pioneered by the Office of Disability Employment Policy within the U.S. Department of Labor in multiple projects, and certainly as a part of the work we're doing with the LEAD Center. The definition, first time in statute, is that customized employment includes and is clearly focused on competitive integrated employment based on individual determination of strengths, needs, and interests of the individual with a significant disability, designed to meet both the specific needs of the individual and employer, a process of negotiation carried out through flexible strategies. One size does not fit all, and this truly is clearly stated within the Title IV and will become a part of services delivered through the vocational rehabilitation system, and certainly would be considered a part of the Unified State Plan and considered a part of what's also happening for job seekers potentially with and without disabilities in terms of looking at customized strategies. Also for the first time is the promotion of financial literacy activities for youth and adults with disabilities under Title I. And there's a rather extensive definition of financial literacy regarding helping people with money management, budgeting, looking as well at dealing with credit scores and improving credit status, reducing debt, really trying to produce a candidate for jobs who is more financially stable and potentially better able to perform, more productive, and certainly as a pathway to the middle class. In Title IV, we also see for the first time extending the length of time for supported employment services from 18 to 24 months. And in Title IV, we see new limitations on the use of subminimum wage. And then finally, we see for the first time, and we're glad to have David Mank as part of our panel, who will be part of questions shortly, is the creation of a federal cross-agency advisory committee on increasing competitive integrated employment for individuals with disabilities. David Mank was selected as the chair by the members of that committee, which met for the first time just a few weeks ago. A little bit more information about Section 511, limitations on the use of subminimum wage. The Section 511 will limit conditions of subminimum wage work for individuals 24 or younger only upon completion of each of the following actions. The individual has received pre-employment transition services. The individual has applied for and been rejected by VR as ineligible for services. The individual has been provided career counseling and information and referrals to other public programs that allow that individual to try out and experience competitive integrated employment. And the individual has been working towards an employment outcome, a competitive integrated employment outcome, for a reasonable period of time without success. Those multiple conditions will need to be in place for that individual to enter for the first time a subminimum wage environment under a 14C certificate, or to remain in a subminimum wage situation. We also know for those who are already receiving subminimum wage, there must be a reassessment every 6 months, a requirement to provide work readiness and job training services, and also for the first time an interesting provision that schools will be prohibited from subcontracting to employment service providers who are going to place individuals in a subminimum wage environment. Next slide. Just as a further piece to look at this in perspective, many of you are familiar with the Disability Employment Initiative, a joint initiative of both the Employment and Training Administration and ODEP, and recognize that at this point in time with this map that we are in round 5 of those very exciting and unique demonstration and pilot programs. In this new round 5, more of course than the prior funded states, we're going to see the implementation really living learning laboratories related to WIOA from a disability perspective. And the Round 5 states, more than ever before, have a clear focus on how do we have inclusive career pathways? How do we get people with disabilities not just get jobs, but have jobs that have a future, a better wage, career potential? So I wanted to just bring that to your attention as a set of demonstrations that continue but have some new relevance, certainly with the key focus areas under WIOA. I next want to turn to Kim Vitelli from the Employment and Training Administration. Kim not only plays a key role related to those DEI cooperative agreements with a host of states, but is also the individual very much working among teams on regulation writing. She is the Chief Division of National Programs at ETA, U.S. Department of Labor. And let me turn it over to Kim. Thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule and being able to share with our very large audience nationwide some of the vision for the workforce system in the future and initial implementation opportunities and what's ahead related to WIOA. Kim?
Thanks, Michael. It's good to be with you all. And I really appreciate the map of the Disability Employment Initiative cooperative agreements, because that has been such an important part of our work. And I really look at DEI as what the rest of WIOA and the workforce system is now catching up to. We were on the cutting edge with it, with DEI, and I think that as states start to implement WIOA to make all of our services accessible to all people, that DEI states are going to be exemplary models for their peers. So thank you for that. You know, overall, this is a really exciting time to be in workforce development. We are at a moment where we can really build off of the successes of WIA and position ourselves to move forward to implement WIOA. And we're really excited about the increased emphasis on disability and the emphasis on cross-program integration in WIOA across all of our programs, even across different DOL-run programs, but also particularly across the Title I programs that DOL manages, as well as adult education and the vocational rehabilitation programs that are managed by the Department of Education. You know, as one symbol of that integration and excitement, our Assistant Secretary, Portia Wu, sits on the Advisory Committee on Competitive Integrated Employment, and not just sits on that committee, but is active on that committee and intends to remain active. The workforce system plays a really important role in connecting all people with competitive integrated employment opportunities. So it's a great thing that we're able to be part of those conversations right from the start, and it's something that our agency and our agency leadership is really excited about. So we have been hard at work, as we know many of the states are hard at work in the local areas, in preparing ourselves for WIOA implementation, which for the Title I programs becomes effective on July 1st, 2015. And of course, it became immediately effective for our colleagues in vocational rehabilitation. ETA plans to issue our draft regulation in the spring of 2015, and we are still on target to meet that revised timeline. And when we do publish the notice of proposed rulemaking, we'll be doing that in as transparent a way as possible. We'll be publishing the regulation on regulations.gov and shouting from the rooftops that it's there so that everybody can review the rule and comment on it. I want to emphasize how important it is to us to be able to get those comments, both what people like, what people don't like, what people want to see change, and what people want to affirm, what we might have left out. There's even parts of the regulation that I'll ask you to look for when it's published that specifically ask for feedback about particular aspects of the regulation. Those are areas that we're particularly interested in getting public comments on. So I ask that everybody set aside some time when the regulation is published, the draft regulation is published, to be able to provide those public comments. The responsibility then falls on us at the end of that comment period to read every single comment. And it's our responsibility to react to those comments and make a judgment call about whether or not we can or should make the changes in the final rule. And it's our responsibility in the final rule to describe what we did with the comments that came in. So the draft regulation obviously gives a picture of the direction that the agencies want to be able to go with WIOA implementation, but it is not the final rule. It is the time for us to hear from the public, from the stakeholders, and from the system about what needs to change. Now, our regulation won't be issued as final until, after that public comment period, and it will be published in January of 2016. The law becomes effective for our system on July 1st, 2015. So that does leave this time period in between, and you might be asking what the system should be doing in that time. ETA will be issuing operational guidance in the spring, really around the same time that the regulation is being published, to explain how states, what states are responsible for doing on July 1st, so that there's clear guidance and expectations for the workforce system from that July 1st implementation date through the date of the final regulation. That operations guidance will be really a series of what we call training and employment guidance letters, the first of which really came out really pretty recently last week, the vision for the workforce system and initial implementation of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014. A series of guidance letters will follow that publication, including some guidance on how to implement the non-discrimination provisions for people with disabilities in Section 188 of WIOA that we have developed jointly across the department. You'll see that the TEGL that we issued last week, February 19th, includes a couple of things, not just a vision for how we intend and hope to implement WIOA, but also some specific action steps that the workforce system can take now. Some of the pieces of the vision include excellent customer service to all people with all strengths, abilities, and barriers to employment, and our expectation that the needs of the customer are what drive the set of services that people receive in American job centers. Some of the activities that the training and employment guidance letter lays out for steps that the workforce system can be taking now includes building and strengthening and reforming connections and partnerships across different programs. Obviously, these connections and partnerships are in place in so many states and local areas, but now is a great time to assess the state of partnerships and reach out and connect partnerships and programs that need to be able to work together in order to deliver integrated services in one-stop centers or American job centers, and to work together on the workforce boards. Another action item that we have laid out in the guidance letter is an ask that all local areas reassess their one-stop delivery system to identify where the processes can be improved, how services can be better integrated, how services can be better tailored to the needs of the individuals. That type of planning and strategic visioning for the delivery of services and the one-stops can take place now. There's no need to wait for a final regulation in order to have those conversations and to assess how service delivery is working at the one-stop, and to be able to start to take the steps now to improve that for continuous improvement in the future. In addition to issuing operations guidance, we have also started to build a set of technical assistance resources that can be used by the workforce system in implementing WIOA. You can find several of these already on our online technical assistance platform, which is www.workforce31.org. there is a WIOA collection on Workforce 3.1 where we have assembled a lot of technical assistance materials from WIA that are still relevant and useful now to be using as we implement WIOA. Technical assistance resources related to partnerships, related to strategic planning, and related to integrated service delivery in the one-stop. On that webpage, we also have some resources about WIOA, including a WIOA 101 set of podcasts and short webcasts that can be useful, particularly when to bring up to speed people who haven't been paying as close attention to WIOA as some of you on the call probably have been. We plan to, we have been developing both our regulation and our policy guidance and our technical assistance with our colleagues, of course, across the department here at the Department of Labor, but also with our colleagues at the Department of Education. And we plan to continue to do so as we roll out our policy and technical assistance. As folks review this policy and technical assistance and identify areas where they have questions or technical assistance needs, we can continue to receive that kind of input at our, on our webpage and at our email address that we've established for WIOA. Our public-facing webpage on the Department of Labor website is www.doleta.gov/WIOA. And our email is one that I obviously should have on the tip of my tongue, but will make sure to put up in the webinar so I don't say it incorrectly. I frequently slip the letters that are necessary. I want to say that it's DOL-WIOA@DOL.gov, but I will validate that and make sure that we get it up in this webinar. And I am ready to answer any questions during our panel discussion. Thanks, Michael.
With us, we're going to go to our panel and ask our panel a few questions. Before we try, I must say the number of questions coming in are coming at a faster pace than I think I can read them, but we'll take some of them, hopefully, before the time runs out. I'm going to go first to Bridget Brown, who was introduced earlier and is the Executive Director of the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. The question is, from your perspective, what is the most important, promising changes included in WIOA that will positively advance employment and economic outcomes for people with disabilities?
That is a great question, but first, Michael, I want to thank you for referring to the one-stops as the center of the universe. We have often thought that, so it's nice to get that validated from, outside worlds. But in answer to your question, and this may surprise some folks on today's webinar, I really do think that one of the most important changes is the focus on serving the business customer. Ultimately, that is where we're going to have the success with the job seekers. I do also think it's important to distinguish that there is a difference between serving a business and referring to them as employers. And it's a vocabulary change that I think we need to really institutionalize. Companies are not in business to hire our job seekers. So we need to refer to them as businesses and change the way in which we are preparing the job seekers and really marketing their skills and their ability. So I do think that that is one of the most important changes, and it may seem semantics, but if you keep the local businesses happy, they will be hiring your job seekers, including individuals with disabilities. I also think that the focus on providing more incumbent training, some more flexibility around the career pathways and work-based learning opportunities is going to be key, particularly with individuals who may have gaps in their employment history or may just start be starting down that path, and that would include some individuals who have disabilities. Once a business owner can see that regardless of an ability or a disability, this individual can come into the workplace and immediately contribute to this business owner's bottom line, and where better to do that than a work-based learning opportunity, they are going to be more likely to hire, retain, and promote that individual.
Thank you, Bridget. Let me turn to Kim, and I know particularly for many of the people, as I looked at who was the participants, for many people in the disability community, they're very familiar with vocational rehabilitation. I must say, even after all these years, they're not as familiar with the Title I employment programs. I know from all the work that's being done at ETA and the regulatory process that's ahead, can you share, Kim, some of your thoughts on really the increased sense, particularly within a unified state plan, the coordination between Title I employment programs and Title IV VR programs?
Sure, absolutely. I think that the integration between all of our core programs, so I should step back and say that WIOA establishes core programs, which include the Title I adult, dislocated worker, and youth programs, as well as the Title III Wagner-Pizer employment services, which are our labor exchange services. The other core programs are adult education and vocational rehabilitation. Those core programs have sort of a heightened expectation of integration, although all of our one-stop partner programs we expect to be integrated and on the ground in the one-stop level. But those core programs have a heightened expectation of integration, and let me just tell you how. For one, when we publish our regulation, we will publish it in a couple different parts, but one really important part is the joint rule, which is an unusual thing for those of you who follow federal regulations. It's really quite an unusual thing for multiple agencies to be able to jointly publish a regulation, and that is what we are doing in WIOA for the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking that's coming out this spring. The joint rule covers unified planning, governance issues such as board, state, and local board responsibilities, as well as performance measures and one-stop operations, because our agencies at the offices at Education for Adult Ed and for Voc Rehab and here at ETA have been working hand in glove since July 22nd, 2015, and of course, arguably before that as well, really intensely since July, to be able to jointly draft this regulation, which means that we've tried to iron out a lot of the things that we anticipate might become issues as partners are trying to work together at the local level. I hope that that's reflected in the regulation, and we're asking people to tell us where it doesn't meet expectations for that purpose. But the joint regulation is a big deal so that it establishes a single set of expectations across all of our programs about how boards will operate, how we'll be measured jointly together in our success in helping people find and keep employment, and in how we deliver services in the one-stop. Let me just talk specifically about some other touch points of integration, not just in the joint rule, but the Unified State Plan is one that all the core programs must be a part of. States will also have the option to include additional partners if they want to in a combined state plan. That's optional. States must include vocational rehabilitation, adult education, and the Title I adult dislocated worker youth and employment services. It's a long thing for me to even just say. I know it's a big challenge for the states to be able to do this joint unified state plan, but it's work that's worthwhile. The integrated and the unified state plan is intended to establish a single strategic plan across all of our programs so that the programs can operate in an integrated way towards a joint vision and a joint goal with joint ways of measuring our success. Our local and state workforce boards have required partners and optional partners. Those core programs include those core programs must be included on the local and state boards. So that includes adult ed and voc rehab as well as our Title I programs. In the one-stop operations section of the law, you can also see that there are high expectations for integration across programs, both in how services are described and how all programs will deliver the relevant career services that make sense for their program, but that all of those partners deliver career services in the one-stop, and in the role of certification of one-stop centers. The law establishes expectations for what will be included in those certifications, and we hope to get public comment as well on the certification process and on all aspects of the rule, of course. We've been, go ahead.
Oh, no, I thought you were pausing and I was going to move. No, keep going. Sorry, Kim.
Okay, so let me I'll say one last thing, and that's in addition to working really, really closely with our partners over in education on the regulation, we have continued those conversations so that we can write policy guidance that jointly or policy guidance that we have to write sort of specific to our individual programs, that we're doing that jointly so that all of our programs know what each other is doing. We need to do that at the federal level so that it can happen at the state and local level, and I want to assure you that we are taking those steps both to be in communication about our policy as well as to stay in touch with each other and coordinate and align and integrate our technical assistance delivery so that we can carry the same message to all of our respective systems. Thank you, Kim.
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, and if you'll pull up the slide, I want to go to David Mank. And David, as I said, is certainly a recognized national expert on service delivery and particularly employment outcomes for people with disabilities. And as we mentioned, is the new chair of the advisory committee, which can you mute your phone? That might be, I'm not sure who of our speakers, but try to mute your phone. So sorry. David is chair of the new advisory committee, which we're all watching intently as it begins its deliberations. And I just, as a disclaimer and make David comfortable, when David speaks, he is not speaking officially on behalf of the advisory committee, but really I ask him questions certainly as the national expert, which we all look to him for advice and good suggestions on policy development. David, the advisory committee has been created to examine critical issues impacting not only 14C subminimum wage certificates, but it goes well beyond that in its mission statement in WIOA, to also talk about and make recommendations about cross-system collaborations and new options for career pathways and just really improved employment and economic outcomes for people with significant disabilities. As you look ahead and you have really multiple perspectives, what do you see are some of the challenges and opportunities that the advisory committee may take up, or issues more from your perspective as a national leader do you see ahead that certainly deserve our attention?
Well, thank you, Michael, and it's great to see the interest and participation here today. Let me answer the second part of your question first, and then I'll get to the former part. I think the most promising things in this act and the things we really need to focus on are several. One, having in the legislation a clear definition of community integrated employment as not only a goal but an outcome is extremely useful. We know exactly what the expected outcomes are in our work. Second, I think it's extraordinarily important that the linkages and the agreements that are expected between vocational rehabilitation, Medicaid, and the intellectual and developmental disability agencies, as well as the mental health agencies, is completely new territory. Each of those agencies have their own histories, their own initial intentions, and yet they found themselves each individually in the arena of employment, and now there's the opportunity to actually be coordinated in that arena with the same outcome in mind. I think the third opportunity, and certainly would be the focus of the advisory committee as the first 2 points I would make, is the extraordinarily important emphasis on the transition years. You know, if there's one thing that we know about transition, it's that the frequency and nature of work experiences while you're still in school is directly related to success after school years. So getting transition right at this point in time and getting work experience to all of these young people while they're still in school is extraordinarily important, and I think we've got to be especially intent on making sure we do that community by community and across individual states and across other states. The advisory committee is tasked with attention to 14C certificates. Certainly been a difficult topic for a long time. You know, I've known of a number of, and hear with some frequency, various perspectives on 14C, people that say we simply need it, people that say they don't like it but they don't know what else to do, people that say we need to eliminate it as a civil rights issue, and people that say we need to do the hard work that makes it unnecessary. I think, you know, asking the question about subminimum wage as a yes or no question just leads down a path that's not very helpful. I think the real question is an understanding when and where and why are we using it under the circumstances right now. When is it that we've done the right kind of work around understanding people's strengths? When is it that we've done the right kind of work around doing discovery of people's talents well? When is it we are learning what we all need to learn about good job matches, that often whether a person is really productive and successful in work is not so much about the talents of the individual, it's about the matchup of who a person is with the needs of an employer in a certain way. So I think the path to follow is twofold in the conversation, and I've, you know, this has been my viewpoint on this for a while, is to ask the question, what would it take to make subminimum wages unnecessary, or certainly less necessary than we seem to be doing right now? And that invokes another really important point, which I think is, what do we need by way of a trained workforce that understands discovery, vocational assessments, job matching, customized employment, and those sorts of things? I think we, implicit in this piece of legislation is the need for investment in our workforce to learn the skills, to work very successfully with people, not only people that are not currently on subminimum wage, but also those that may be using subminimum wage at this point.
Thank you, David, for not only your, you know, providing, I think, a really interesting and helpful perspective on 14C subminimum wage certificates, but also you pinpointing, and I liked your three. What are three major changes in WIOA from a disability perspective? I want to go back to Bridget for a moment, because one other really major change in the way the workforce development system has operated in the past, but will change in the future, is moving away from the tiered service approach. Many of us who have worked within or been participants in some way in the workforce development system realize that many people didn't need the tiered approach, needed intensive support, and didn't need to go through this kind of continuum. Congress responded by removing the tiered approach and putting a new focus on career services and training. I'm interested, Bridget, from the perspective of the workforce, development professional, who certainly are represented by your association, this really means a change in culture, a change in process, a change in the way services are delivered to job seekers with and without disabilities. I wonder if you can comment on that, and what is some of the preparation that you're seeing happen out in the field and you're going to look at from a national level, because we really are as we move to WIOA implementation with a very new, enlightened approach.
We were actually very excited to see the elimination of the tiered approach. It was something that we had been wanting for a while. What this does is it goes towards a streamlined process for the job seeker. You're not having them jump through hoops that really do not benefit them. What it means for the professional at the local level, whether they're in a one-stop or in a faith or community-based organization, is it's a different type of skill. And what we're doing is we're working with the local workforce professionals to build some of those skills. We're moving away from that, well, this is what the program says. First you have to do this, then that, and moving more towards a career coaching way of working with the job seeker to get to, I think David had mentioned earlier, some of the really good assessments, sitting down and actually relating to the job seeker on an individual basis instead of, well, this is, I have to check this box sort of basis. And I think that we have a lot that the Title I system can learn from the different parts of the system. I consider adult ed and vocational rehabilitation part of the larger system. So the integrated planning, I think, will only strengthen the system once we work out some of these kinks and terminology. So I think it is really a different way of looking, that we are going to become less the person in front of the room saying thou shalt, and more towards a facilitation. What that means is not only different skills for many of the people who are in the local areas, but we're going to need to build a little bit more, in some cases a lot more, cultural sensitivity, because we're going to be dealing in some ways, a more intimate way of really getting to know the client, and the customer choice aspect will always still be front and center. So it's a really, for those of us who spent a lot of time in the career development aspect, it's actually very exciting. What it also means is we really need to think through at the local area, what do we have in terms of tools that will help facilitate this change? Do we have the right assessments? Or are we giving people a particular assessment because that's what we've always done and haven't really thought about, well, who are the individuals coming through our door? You know, is it an individual with a disability? Is it an individual for whom English is not their native language? Is it a dislocated worker? And making sure that we have a variety of tools in a variety of different methods that we can help them do a little bit more career exploration. I think one of the things that we do also need to be mindful of is, even with the streamlined approach, there's still going to be limited money for actual training. So we're going to need to really leverage, to the extent that we can, the work-based learning opportunities, be them apprenticeship programs or any other type of work-based learning opportunities for youth and for adults. And not everyone needs training. So the workforce practitioner is really going to need to think long and hard about, what does this individual need in order to be successful? What are the goals that need to be met? What's the timeline? And how do we facilitate that actually happening? So more problem solving, more innovation, more really understanding what it takes in order to make this person successful. What type of supportive services are necessary, and who in the community may have those supportive systems or services, be them transportation or anything else. So I'm actually really excited about this opportunity. There's some things that we need to work out around contracting and who's going to do what and how and where, and all of the things that, you know, putting the system together. But in terms of the impact on the job seeker, I'm hoping it's just going to make their life a lot easier and a lot more meaningful when they come into one of the centers.
Thank you, Bridget. I think the next question, maybe I'll throw to Kim first, but maybe all three of our panelists may want to comment on it, is a centerpiece of the community college system, a centerpiece of the workforce investment system are community colleges. We've heard recently President Obama talk about his dream that anyone with wanting to get a degree in higher education, we should make it easier, bring the cost down to maybe nothing, that it be free to go to community colleges. The workforce system has been working with community colleges for some time on regional economic sector, different market sector strategies to create pathways with new kinds of certifications, working with the business community, the education community, and the workforce investment system. My question is what can be done with all of these various stakeholders, the state workforce system, community agencies, employers, community colleges, all relevant partners, collaborators in the next stage of WIOA implementation. What can they do more together to make sure that when we're building these collaborations in new ways, which really are getting people the skills that they need to be in better wage jobs and careers, how do we make sure they're inclusive of people with disabilities? And I maybe was going to throw that to Kim first, but Kim and Bridget and David, you may have all thoughts about it.
Sure. So I think that this is an area, and you sort of already hinted at it, where career pathways is really an excellent unifying framework for how we can deliver education and training and support services to all different kinds of people with all different kinds of needs and help all of them become successful and to move at their own pace, whether that's to skip over a bunch of things that they already know or to spend extra time at some foundational level that's needed in order to successfully move on to the next piece. A career pathways framework also recognizes the need for people to be able to earn and learn at the same time, with on-ramps and off-ramps into training that I think is particularly relevant for people with disabilities. And our Disability Employment Initiative and our Round 5 grants recognized that and asked that and challenged states and local areas to think through how they were implementing career pathway strategies to make sure that it was meeting its intended goal of being a flexible delivery system for all people. I mean, there's a couple different points that can help adjust career pathway programs, but I mean, I would also sort of encourage people to find out about DEI if they're not already familiar with it, and to pay attention to our upcoming funding opportunity announcement as well. You know, it's a matter of making sure that outreach is inclusive, and that assessments are inclusive, and that individual education and employment plans look at the whole person and are tailored to individual needs. Making sure that content is delivered in a way that in a flexible manner and that is tailored to what is needed to be successful in the job, not just what might be on the shelf that we always give out, and that the follow-up that's necessary. Well, I should say, I guess sort of next in the sequence would be about really, really good labor exchange and matching people to the job that's just right for them, and that includes customized employment. And that follow-up and supportive services all along the way are addressing the human needs of everybody that is in an education or a training program and moving into employment, so that the human services needs can also be addressed to help people remain in training and complete training, and to be able to remain stable in their early stages of employment, that follow-up continues even after somebody's in employment to make sure that they're able to be successful.
Thank you, Kim. David, do you have some thoughts about, I know in increasing numbers, people with varying disabilities are participating in programs in community colleges. but it's really a triangular relationship between the education system at higher education levels, the workforce investment system, and employers. And thoughts about how can people with disabilities be more included within what those three partners are trying to work on together?
Well, great question, Michael, and I think we've learned, we're learning quite a bit about that in the last, especially the last 5 years, as an increasing number of post-secondary education environments have been developed for people with disabilities and including people with intellectual disabilities. I mean, there are literally hundreds of post-secondary programs now for people with intellectual disabilities around the country. And that includes a lot of community colleges where the partnerships between community colleges, community agencies, and employers are being built, because most of these post-secondary education programs are expecting that they're having a vocational component. I just would remind myself and everybody else that when we talk about high school to post-secondary education, we're still talking school to work, but it may be school to work, but the vocational job experience part of a post-secondary education program shouldn't be overlooked. I've been hearing a phrase lately that I think is particularly useful when we think about this one person at a time, and Bridget's notion and others of developing careers, and that's resume building. What are we doing to help people build a resume that helps demonstrate to employers that an individual has had both education and experience that will be relevant in a future working environment? So I think we need to do an increasingly better job of understanding what kind of successful post-secondary education programs, in particular in community colleges, already have built the relationships that you're talking about in new ways. And think about not only are those relationships new, but the funding structures that support those individuals in combining potentially, education, Medicaid, vocational rehabilitation, intellectual developmental disability agency funding, or case management, et cetera, calls for a whole bunch of new possibilities. And I think we've already got some experience to build on if we can understand some of the emerging examples of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Bridget, did you want to just
just one quick. When we are creating career pathways, which I am a huge fan of, they are going to really be dependent on having quality and comprehensive local labor market information. So whatever career pathway is being developed at the local level, we do have to keep in mind that the ultimate goal, in our system at any rate, is employment. So the on-off ramp, the multiple points, is absolutely critical. And working with our training providers, which include obviously community colleges, but also others, to integrate more short-term training opportunities and more flexible scheduling. Not everyone is going to be able to make it to a training program during the day. They may have other type of things that they've got going on, or they may be working part-time or family responsibilities. And local businesses are going to need somebody now. So, think more flexibility, think short-term options as well, but make sure that your labor market information is real, is current, and make sure that when you are putting resources into a career pathway, that ultimately there are jobs available in your community at the end of the pathway.
Thank you, Bridget. I want to take you to, as we are moving towards the end in time, I want to take you to this question. Really, as we said at the beginning in terms of outcomes, all three of our panelists have given an extraordinary insights and perspective on where we are and where we're trying to go, and particularly about cross-system coordination, level of collaboration between the public and private sector. It's been extraordinary. I want to take us now to action. We have hundreds of people listening to this webinar across the country. What can people be doing now? and I'll add either at the state or local level, to improve employment and economic outcomes through the workforce investment system and its partners, so that the systems are inclusive of people with disabilities, providing expanded opportunity and hopefully enhanced outcomes. And maybe I'll go to Kim first. Let's be action-oriented. We have lots of people who are at state level activity, and we have lots of people both inside and outside of the workforce development system at a local level. If you had to narrow to one or at most two things, what actions would you encourage them to be engaged in right now, Kim?
That's a great question. You know, this is some of what we tried to address in the February guidance, but I would say that, you know, a well-functioning board is the foundation, and a well-functioning one-stop are the foundations for the entire workforce system. If the board is strategic, has the right people at the table, has a clear vision, then a lot of other things can fall into place. But if the board is operating in a way that isn't, you know, bringing all the partners together or isn't being able to clearly communicate its vision, then a lot of other stuff can fall down. That doesn't mean that there couldn't still be success, but having good boards in place is really foundational for establishing how the one-stops are going to be run consistently. There's always inventive and creative and empowered one-stop directors who are also a really critical ingredient. So, I mean, I sort of almost don't know which one to put first, but the board is able to establish that foundation. So if local areas focus on one thing, it's making sure that, that the boards are built on a foundation of strong partnerships with well-designed, clearly understood policies, so that the work can be carried out in an effective, long-term way.
Thank you, Kim. I think that's great advice, and I would urge people to think about, if you have never been to a local WIB meeting or a state WIB meeting, depending on what levels you're engaged in, here's a great opportunity. These are pivotal months, and so great advice, Kim. Let me go to Bridget. How about you? Picking out one, at most two things for action for the many people who are listening on this call.
I think there are two things, and we've kind of talked around both of those. So I'm going to set aside my soapbox about rethinking business engagement, but I think that one of the best use of time right now is resource mapping. If you believe at the state or the local level, and we represent both, although we're primarily local, that you are going to have more demands being placed on your staff to be able to serve more diverse job seekers and serve them well, then you're going to need to go out to the community and think creatively on who you can partner with, whom you may have not been partnering before, particularly around the issue of serving individuals with disability. The other issue has to do with partnerships, and I think that we need to make sure that we're not just partners signing off on a plan, not just partners who sit in meetings and drink coffee together, but that we really understand each other's programs. And Michael, you said something earlier on that I was nodding my head, which you can't see in a web-based meeting, and that is that you had said that VR had not necessarily understood Title I. Well, the reverse is even more true. So we are now going to be judged, for lack of a better term, all of us, on consistent performance metrics, which means to really be collaborative at the local level in a meaningful way, we have to really understand each other's programs. Because just saying that we have the same performance metrics, that's great, but the programs are run slightly differently or more than slightly differently. So we need to understand what are the pain points, how does that part of the system work in order to really think through who does what part better And how can we collaborate, be it a common intake form or whatever it might be, so that we're serving that individual, and particularly the individual with a disability doesn't fall through the cracks. We're not trying to toss them back and forth. She's yours, no, she's mine, no, she's theirs. So the adult ed, the vocational rehabilitation portion, ES, the traditional WIOA one-stop system, we really need to understand each other's programs. When I ask people when I travel around the country, have you even read other parts of the title? The majority of the time I get the answer no. That's your first thing. If you don't want to read the entire piece of legislation, which totally I get, there's some great summaries out there, but at least be familiar with what your partners are facing so you understand the stress they're bringing to the table when you're trying to negotiate things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bridget. Let me go quickly to David.
Said in a slightly different way, something that I think all of us can do is like go make 3 new friends. Depending on where you sit, find out who the local transition coordinator is and make a new friend, or the vocational rehabilitation counselor, or the CMS provider. You know, I think that's something each of us could do is to go, call somebody and say, look, we haven't met, but this WIOA is coming, and we should talk. Let's have coffee and see if we can move forward. Second thing that I would say is reach out to our community colleges. As I've gotten to know our community colleges here in Indiana better, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but they're a pretty friendly place to people that have been at a disadvantage that are wanting to get out of poverty or overcome a disadvantage of some kind. And I think they may be friendlier to disability issues than we might immediately assume. Third thing I think we can all do, and that is look for great examples. Situations where we go, you know what, I might not have thought that was possible. Find those examples in our own communities and start talking about what it took to make those things happen.
I think, again, great advice, and I think for the audience here, we've gotten very complimentary set of proposed action steps. But it is about making and understanding potential relationships, finding ways to even bring into the fold the way, perhaps for the first time in so many communities, people with disabilities are going to be a part of those career pathways. And understanding, as Kim mentioned, is there's a policy group. There is a group of people at a state and a local level, the workforce investment boards, who are going to be making decisions about how can we make our system better? How can we build these partnerships to be even stronger? And it's an opportunity, as David said, make new friends, get engaged, get involved. We're going to take you to the next set of slides. There is a piece on the Lead Center website where I share with you 8 actions you can consider. I'm not going to go over them now, but we'll go right past this slide. I hope you'll take a look at them, and we'll go on to what I think is very important, is the second set of actions. Kim shared with you most of these really critical TEGL, Technical Assistance Guidance, number 1914, just came out in the last week and really gives you the vision and things you can be doing right now, whether you're a potential customer, whether you're a workforce professional, whether you're a board member, whether you're a community partner, opportunities to really get involved and stay engaged. Next slide. I want to share with you the opportunity that is ahead. This is just the first of a 4-part series. Our next really extraordinary opportunity to learn more and be more engaged will be on April 29th, where we will focus in more depth on WIOA and the Unified State Planning process, April 29th from 3 to 4:30 Eastern Time. And then we will follow that up on June 24th, WIOA, in terms of a focus on youth services. And again, inclusive opportunities for youth with disabilities. And then we will finish up on September 24th, from 3 to 4:30 on Section 188, the non-discrimination provisions and the promotion of equal opportunity and effective and meaningful participation of job seekers with disabilities within the workforce investment system. I want you to also know that for those of you who are on board today, we will also do a very important webinar in conjunction with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on their final rule on non-residential services, an overview of that final rule and sub-regulatory guidance and how it impacts employment of individuals with significant disabilities. We hope to have a panel of leading experts from CMS, and that is an extraordinary opportunity to learn more. Again, as David mentioned several times, there is now in the Unified State Plan under WIOA this necessity, this mandate to engage Medicaid, mental health, intellectual developmental disabilities, ticket to work programs, is not as separate opportunities, but a collaborative effort to improve employment and economic outcomes for people with disabilities. That will be on March 25th, also from 3 to 4:30. Next slide. We want you to know that there are a variety of resources been mentioned several times today. The Lead Center Policy Brief, summary of major policies included in Title 1 and 4 of WIOA from a disability perspective, 8 actions you can consider to support youth and adults with disabilities in WIOA implementation, and as Kim mentioned, extraordinary resources available on Workforce 3.1 that can also help you understand and share with others where are we going and how can we all be a part of this really systematic transformation of the workforce investment system. Next slide. We also want you to be aware of opportunities to connect with the Lead Center via the Lead Center News. You can also connect with us on much of social media as well. I want us, in the interest of time, I don't know, we're going to have to work through this. We probably got easily over 100 questions. And I suspect the challenge will be for the Lead Center to, I know as we've been on, has been answering some of them in the chat box as fast as we could. There were a lot of questions about sub-minimum wage. There were a lot of questions about coordination and aspiration for better coordination between Title I programs and VR. That was certainly a focus of a lot of the conversation with our panel. There were additional questions about accessibility of one-stops and true opportunity for people with disabilities to use their ticket to work, and how many workforce systems, AJCs and WIBs have become employment networks, and how do I find out? We will have to work through and look through all these questions and find a way that we can probably on our website, where I believe the transcript and the slides from this webinar in 1 week will be there. We will work at full speed ahead to try to answer as many of these questions and post those answers there. In many cases, the questions really will not be known, the answers will not be known until we move ahead with, as Kim mentioned, the timeline for guidance coming through proposed rules, and then further asking the public for comment before we eventually get to final rules. But we will try to help answer as much as we can. And I first, before we draw to a close, want to thank our really wonderful panelists today, Kim, David, and Bridget, for your candor, for your perspectives, which I think will help all of us move ahead in WIOA implementation. Before we close, I want to turn back to Kim and to make a few last-second comments.
Thanks, Michael. we're going to just take a point of personal privilege here, and apologies in advance if this seems odd to anyone, but we wanted to seize the opportunity. We have lost a tremendous advocate and expert in disability employment policy. Our friend and colleague, who I think probably several of you on the webinar know, Randy Chafkin, passed away yesterday morning in what was really a shock to us and as well to her family. She was an architect of our Disability Employment Initiative. She's been a thinker and influencer on issues related to disability employment and accessibility and evaluations and competitive integrated employment and how Ticket to Work and the workforce system link up together and how VR and the workforce system link up together. Her influence was large and her circle of friends was even wider. She was our friend and we miss her, and it just felt like we needed to share the news with everyone today while we're talking about something that was so important to her. So I'm sorry to share the news, and thank you, Michael, for letting us make the announcement.
Thank you, Kim, and I know in our prayers and in our heart, Randy will be with us forever. She has been a colleague, a friend, an advocate, has moved the needle and moved the mountain, and we all know there's so much more work to be done to create inclusive communities and inclusive workforce investment systems. But she certainly set us forward on that path, and we need to continue to move forward on that journey. Let me thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you from the LEAD Center. Thank you, ODEP, for the continued funding support of the LEAD Center. Thank you, ETA. Thank you, the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. And thank you, David Mank, for your insights and your continued inspiration. Please join us on this continuing series during the course of the year. I hope you've marked it on your calendar, and we hope to continue to give you insight, perspective, and to promote individual and systems change. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.